Hello, everyone. Back for another episode. And what we're talking about today, as you can see, is something that's so very important to truly understand, which is the greenhouse effect. Mr. Farinelli here. We're talking about the greenhouse effect. Obviously, the thought of the day makes us think change is something we always need to keep in mind. Some of the things that make life a struggle is dealing with change. And in making that connection to the greenhouse effect, obviously that's the effects of the greenhouse effect always changing, but maybe we need to also recognize what's our true perspective of what the greenhouse effect really is trying to explain. So, right on those lines, let's think about a couple things. Is the greenhouse effect a positive or negative? In your mind, what do you think? Now, that can mean a lot of different things. So with that in mind, thinking about that, that's going to be a question I'm going to ask you. When you think about a greenhouse, obviously warmth and all that good stuff and what that brings to it, is that bringing a negative or a positive to us as humans? So essentially, with that as a backdrop, I'm going to ultimately ask you to explain what the greenhouse effect really is, and ultimately what does it provide for us. Now, before we do that, I'm going to ask you a couple predictions. We got the ozone layer here, and you'll notice that the sun's rays, you'll notice I have two sets of rays, two sets of arrows hitting the ozone layer, and only one gets through. In terms of a complete ozone layer, that's important to recognize. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is make a prediction. Notice now there is no ozone layer. What do you think would happen to Earth, and poor old Miss Abby White here, if there was no ozone layer and the sun's rays had free range coming into our atmosphere and ultimately onto Earth? That's prediction one. Second prediction, once again, no ozone layer. We recognize that the sun's rays are going to hit Earth. There are things that are going to also reflect that energy back off of Earth. My second question is, what would happen if, once again, there's no ozone layer and the rays are bouncing off of Earth? What would be the effect? So there's ultimately two different predictions, all based around having no ozone layer. Think about that. That's one of the things I will ask you to comment on. Now, ultimately here, folks, what we got to think about is, to explain the greenhouse effect, you have to understand, what does a greenhouse provide for us? Now, I'm not talking about plants, but I'm talking about an overall greenhouse in our environment. What could it possibly provide for us? Some of the things. Now, along those same lines, does the greenhouse effect provide a balanced environment? So think about, can it balance our environment? Think about, when you're trying to decipher this question, what environmental things are we trying to balance, specifically in this picture, might help you. So think about that if we're trying to create a balance. Now, the other thing I'm going to ask is to better understand this. In this picture, we see the sun's rays. What you need to recognize is we're going to have to understand there are steps to this process. So the rays enter through the greenhouse. Where do they go once they enter into Earth? Are they going to bounce out? Do they even make it through? And once they're in, can they get back out? That's some of the things we need to really understand in order to recognize what's going on in terms of the greenhouse effect. So, along those lines, folks, what are we shooting for? You're going to create your two predictions. What does it provide for us? Is it good or bad? And what are the steps? So it's all about the greenhouse effect today, folks. And as always, all the best.
And you were breathing everywhere. You thought you found a friend to take you out of this place.